I want to go to the issue of droughts and dams now, and I'm joined by Queensland LNP member Keith Pitt. Thanks for joining us, Keith. There's been a lot of talk about dams, water infrastructure, lack of progress by state and federal governments in recent years, a bit of a rush now to try and get some proposals underway. But you're suggesting that we might actually need constitutional changes so that Canberra can just go in and build dams, not have to worry about state governments.
Chris, I think we need to understand the level of anger and frustration that's out there amongst the Australian public. I mean, I posted a video on my Facebook page this week. It's been less than 48 hours of 400 megalitres a day of fresh water that's been run into the Pacific Ocean from the Paradise Dam through the Burnett River in Bundaberg. That's had nearly 60,000 views in under 48 hours, and the comments are, people are just furious. So what I'm saying is that there needs to be action, and if the state doesn't want to get on board, well, the Commonwealth needs to find a way to deliver that infrastructure.
Yeah, well, you would expect that, you would hope that would be the case, but there are all sorts of legal and constitutional impediments these days, aren't there? In fact, I think the management of water resources, was a big sticking point right back at the time of Federation. What does the Constitution actually say about who has responsibility here?
Well, you're right, it's been ever thus, and the states do have that constitutional requirement. But this is a time of crisis. We need to acknowledge that. The federal government certainly stepped in terms of health systems in Tasmania and a number of other areas over a long period of time. And we have states like the Queensland Labor government who quite simply don't want to do anything. It's against their ideology, it's against their green beliefs. We've got people out there now who are really hurting, and we need to take every step we can to ensure we provide reliable water supplies into the future. Now, there's not much we can do about that right now, but certainly for the next drought, we can make sure we are well prepared and that infrastructure is in place. I mean, Chris, there are buildings full of lawyers in Canberra. I'm sure they can find a way.
Yeah, well, I just want to go back to that because as I recall this, and I haven't had a chance to read up on it today, but my recollection of our Federation history is that especially South Australia didn't want to cede management of waters and rivers to the federal government because at the end of the river it might get left short. So as you're saying, that's not a federal power. So it was very deliberately done so that the states could have input into this. Are you suggesting we would have a referendum to give the federal government complete control over these interstate waterways, something like the Murray-Darling Basin, for instance, so that they could put in dams, pipelines, weirs, whatever they like, whenever they like, without having to worry about state government input?
Chris, what I've said, and I'm on the record, is we need to do everything we can as quickly as possible to deliver what's needed. If the states don't want to play ball, well, absolutely. Let's take it to the people, and I'm pretty sure I know what their answer would be, because right now the mob are angry. They want us to do more, and I'm very pleased. I've seen reports today that we obviously will be delivering more in terms of drought support across the country within the next couple of weeks. But if we want to build infrastructure, we've got to stop letting bureaucracy being the reason for inaction. We've allowed all of these bits and pieces of bills and legislation and reasons not to do things to build up over many decades. And I congratulate the New South Wales State Government. They've taken real action in the last month to try and ensure they can fast-track projects for water infrastructure in New South Wales. We need other states to do the same.
Keith Pitt, are you pleased that Scott Morrison has tipped another $1 billion into the Clean Energy Fund?
Well, I think that's just a matter of necessity. I mean, we've had the state governments have been out there basically running high school experiments on energy in their networks. We know the results of that in South Australia. It's an unreliable supply. It's the highest cost of electricity in the world. So we have to take action to try and back some of those intermittent wind and solar sources up. But the idea that we can transport every state's energy needs between states and across the country, well, the physics just doesn't stack up on that. We need to ensure that whatever we do, we provide reliable generation into the future, and that we don't provide energy poor in other areas of the country.
Isn't that the point, though? You need investment in dispatchable and reliable energy generation, not an extra $1 billion to try and encourage even more investment in renewable energy?
Well, I think there's two points to be made there. The first one is we've got what we've got. We've got 50% intermittent wind and solar in South Australia backed up by diesel generators. We have Victoria and Queensland now trying to do the same thing. We've got a whole stack of generation that doesn't work of a night time or when it's not windy. So we need to ensure we do have that supply, and that means backup and dispatchable power. So my understanding is that's a lot of what's been put into the Clean Energy Corporation. But fundamentally, $1 billion, it won't be enough. You can't replace a 2,000 megawatt power station with that level of money. We do need future investment, but it has to be in reliable generation. And obviously that needs to be come at a cost which people can afford.